If you're in Seattle, and you need to buy or sell a home, we'll be right there for you. Because we're the realtors that you can trust. So go to ronanddonsitdown.com.
You're listening to The Ron and Don Show on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Hey, you guys, what's going on? And welcome to another edition of the Ron and Don Show. And we are back live in the Les Schwab studio.
What is up, Ron and Don Nation?
Hey, coming up on the Ron and Don Show, Ron wants to talk about traffic. So whenever he talks about traffic, it's always a lot of fun. So we'll make sure we talk about that. And also, what is going on with all the office space in Seattle? I just saw this story about San Francisco, how it's being reborn. And for so long, it was too expensive to take office space and turn that into residential living space. But San Francisco has found a way to do it. Does that become a path for us here in the great Pacific Northwest? Before we get to that, though, let's get to this. Spike Lee has a new film out. It's a 3-part docuseries. It's on Netflix. It's the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, which happened August 29th, 2005. So I've been chatting with some of my friends down in NOLA, as we like to call it. Ron, have you seen the 3-part series? And what is your reaction to 20 years as you and I live down there?
I have not seen it, but I will look it up. I had sent you a video. I was cruising through my YouTube algorithm, and they sent me a 20-year reunion of Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, which is the eye of the storm. And that's where I had, like, I'll call it a beach house. It was a couple miles from the beach, but I thought of it as a beach house. And so a little plot of land.
It became a beach house.
It became a beach house.
It did,
The water came to me. And so they did it, and it was a really cool little small town, and it had a oceanfront drive with really nice sort of old Southern style houses with the white columns, and you had a downtown with a pie shop, and I had my little scooter, and you'd go down there, and there were restaurants and bars, and there was even like a casino and a riverboat and all this stuff that you could. It was a great little town because New Orleans doesn't have beaches. New Orleans has a bayou, and so if you wanted beaches, it's like going from Seattle to Tacoma. It was about a 45-minute drive, and I had my little spot that I could go to the beach. And that's right where the eye of the hurricane went. And so that town was completely decimated. And I have a clear recollection of when I went back 5-6 weeks later, that there was several people on the beach that I became friendly with. And they had these nice houses and car, like everything you see with a house. A house, cars, stuff in the garage, like all the stuff, lawnmowers, like all the stuff. And so I got there to the corner because I would always go walk my dogs, and they had dogs, and we would become friends. And so I'm standing there looking at what used to be these houses of people that I would talk to, and it wasn't that they were destroyed. It was that they no longer existed. There would be, and you may have seen these photographs, there would be, if there were a set of stairs that were set in concrete, those survived. And the foundation would survive, but that's it. Like it wasn't like, oh my gosh, it's splinters and there's a big pile of debris, and the car was flooded and it's on its side. Everything was just gone, and that was the part where it was a real. I was going to say mind F, but a real like brain teaser for me of going, where did this stuff go? Like there were houses here and vehicles and trucks, and there was a restaurant that had a walk-in freezer and a 40-foot long bar out onto a pier. Where is this stuff? Obviously it's in the ocean somewhere, but to see how devastated that was. Train tracks gone, bridges gone, the seawall was gone, the little shop, I think it's called the Red Dog Cafe, where I got my pecan pie and my cup of coffee. It was some of the wall still existed, but it was pretty much gone. So to go back and see this retrospective of it was the same reporters that had worked there 20 years ago, and now they were anchors, and they showed their old footage, and to see that town rebuilt was nothing short. I was like, this is crazy interesting. I have to send this to Don because you drove through Bay St. Louis seeing if my house survived before I did, because I was taking horses and dogs up to Jackson, Mississippi, and then over to New Mexico, and you saw it before I saw it.
Yeah, which New Mexico's right on the way.
It is. Very close. When you got a horse, man, you just got to find a place to put it.
Well, I'm going to talk about the docuseries here in a moment. What is your take on 20 years? Because this particular docuseries really focuses on the lower Ninth Ward and what happened in Seattle specifically, and it's a follow-up to when the levees broke. Because Spike Lee created When the Levees Broke as well. So this is a follow-up to that. It's for people that don't know, this storm was expected to hit Florida, right? We were more concerned about your parents than we were about ourselves. And I can remember sitting in a Houston's with a friend of mine, and we were
Houston's restaurant.
Yeah,
Houston,
and
Texas.
we were buying drinks from people that had come over from Texas, and they were staying in New Orleans. And then as we're watching the TV, we began to see the storm take shape and shift, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's no longer heading for Florida. So you saw all the people from Florida leave New Orleans because that's where they evacuated to, and now the storm is coming our way. And then at the last moment, and the docuseries talks about this, the hurricane jumps. So think about this. You have Texas, then you have Louisiana, then you have Mississippi, then you have Alabama, then you have Florida. It's supposed to hit Florida, but instead it is now heading toward the mouth of the Mississippi to New Orleans, which if that levee breaks, you'll probably never see that city again. And this is the thing that New Orleans always feared, was the Mississippi breaking apart.
It's below sea level.
Yeah, the whole city's below sea level. So that didn't happen. Right at the end, it jumped and it landed right where your home was in Bay City, St. Louis. And you're right. That whole town just evaporated. And not only the town on the coast, but you could drive 5 and 6 miles in and see cars that had floated around, or boats or shrimpers that floated around, or cargo.
You see a shrimp boat in a tree.
Yeah.
It was wild.
5, 6 miles in. Your house was up on stilts like 17, 18 feet. And your house was miles in, and the storm surge still came through at 26 feet. So it was really incredible to see that. Or go down to Interstate 5 and see big ships just leaning up against the interstate. It was very mind-blowing. I've never seen anything like it. And it's hard to explain to people not only what you've seen, but what you heard. You saw the suffering, and then the people dying after that, and then the federal government not coming to help, which I'm going to talk about here in a moment. What's your take on that, on the city today where you used to live in Mississippi?
Well, my take is, and it's filtered through the glasses of being in the Pacific Northwest for so long, is just the huge difference between economies. When your economy is built on hospitality and it's built on tourism versus being built on, Fortune 10 companies, and the amount of just money in circulation around a community. So coming back to Seattle, I feel exceptionally grateful for, and some of the breaks that went our way to get on afternoon drive at Cairo. A lot of dominoes had to fall, some of them tragic, some of them just happenstance that fell our way, and we did the work, but it fell our way, and we were able to step into that position. Because being in this environment was such a stark contrast when I would go back to New Orleans, where they just didn't have the resources. And you had so many people that were poor, and they sort of fade into the background when you're in your bubble, in a sense, where it's like, I lived in my house and I would go to my job and I would see you, and sometimes we'd do a remote, or we'd meet an advertiser, and we'd go to restaurants and a show or a basketball game or whatever. But it was easy to make a life and not realize the abject poverty that was a couple miles away.
What would you say to people, because my son asked me that. He said, you see all these people leave, Dad, and then you see a lot of people like in the Holly Grove or the lower Ninth Ward, and they stayed behind. He said, why did they stay behind?
Because what else do they have? And a lot of people didn't have even $1,000. Like you would think of it, like the money that I spent to take horses and dogs to New Mexico was not insignificant. Like it wasn't tens of thousands of dollars, but it was thousands of dollars. Hotels, meals, gas, all the expenses of just moving around most people in New Orleans, I would say most, a large percentage of people in New Orleans don't have that money. And a lot of people didn't have a car. It was a very walkable city. It had public transportation that was reliable. And so if you were someone, let's say you worked in the French Quarter in a hotel or in the casino or on Bourbon Street, it's easy to take public transportation back and forth to work. And we met so many people that had never been out of Louisiana in their lives. And they're like, why would I want to leave Louisiana? And it's like, you've never been to Florida or to Dallas? Or they're like, nope, never been there. So they didn't have the resources to do it. And then the other thing is all they had was what they had, meaning that if your grandma had a house that was paid for, most of the time that became your parents' house and then that became your house. And you wouldn't necessarily be on title or have insurance or anything. That was the family house. And
it was paid for, so you didn't have to get insurance, which a lot of people didn't. And in the lower Ninth Ward, for a lot of those folks, because it is below sea level, but it's the first place where African Americans in America could actually buy land. And that's why it was sold to them, because it had flooded before. But it was very, very difficult for people in the lower nine to get insurance.
So I guess my thing is filtered by moving to Seattle was a stroke of good fortune. It helped rebuild my life, and to go from nothing to something in a pretty short amount of time, I felt very grateful for. What about you?
Well, let's do this. Let's take a break here.
Back in 2 and 2.
We come back. Thank you, Chuck Woolery, on the Love Connection. I love that show. We come back. Let's talk specifically about this docuseries and where I agreed with it, and then at the end where it lost me. Because I think a docuseries like this can really help. And I thought the first 2 episodes were really powerful. And then in the final episode, a couple things saddened me about it, because I always hope that a docuseries like this will help move humanity forward. And I don't think it did. And I'll tell you why on the other side of this. Hey, you guys, Ron and Don here from Les Schwab. You know, I got our new Les Schwab tires. You and I are going to do a Ron and Don sit down. We're going down I-5. Do you remember what happened? What was right in the middle of the road?
I do. I don't remember what it was, but you hit something.
It was a tire.
Okay.
Yeah, I hit somebody else's tires. Luckily, I had my brand new tires on from Les Schwab, so nothing happened to the rig other than when this semi-tire went under my van. Where were we going? Probably 60, 65 miles an hour. I think it was the speed limit. I'd never go over that. Next thing you know, my alignment was way off. So what I do, I called Eric over here at Les Schwab and Ballard, and I stopped in, and he said, hey, we'll get that fixed.
Yeah, I mean, they even checked it for free. The upside, proper alignment can mean better fuel economy, smoother handling, safer driving, and longer lasting tires. Think your alignment might be off? Stop by Les Schwab for a free visual alignment check. Visit your local Les Schwab or book today at leschwab.com. That's leschwab.com.
If you find yourself dreaming about a new home, go from just a dream to the Dream Team. Schedule your time at ronandonsitdown.com.
All right, you guys, welcome back to the Ron and Don Show. We're talking a little bit about the 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina.
I forgot to say one thing. The 20-year thing was like, wow, I'm old. That happened 20 years ago?
Right.
What the heck?
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk to people from New Orleans, they always ask you, were you there before the storm or were you there after the storm? They just call Katrina the storm, right? And so it's also interesting to see the people that made it back and the people that did not. And what Spike Lee talks about in this particular docuseries is that a lot of the black middle class, people that lived in places like the Holly Grove, people that were insurance salesmen, or they were doctors, or they were attorneys, it's those people who didn't make it back after Katrina.
Really?
And one of the reasons was for that is we hear about do you remember what the road home money was? Do you remember the road home?
It was a federal program where you got grants.
Billions of dollars to rebuild homes.
Except for me and you. We never got a dime.
Yeah,
from
but it was
anybody.
based on the value of your home. So if you were to go uptown, or they call it the Sliver on the River, how would you describe uptown or the Sliver on River and the homes that are there for people that haven't been there?
Quote unquote high ground. A lot of homes built in the 1700s, 1800s. Beautiful homes.
A lot of mansions there, right?
Yeah, a lot of mansions.
And a lot of white people that live there. There's some black people that live there, but lots of white people live there. They call it the Sliver on the River. And this is the 20% of New Orleans, because it's tucked in right by the Mississippi, that didn't flood, right? And so when we look at this particular docuseries, and it wasn't the initial storm that killed people in New Orleans and the surrounding area, it was what happened after when the levees broke. And when the levees broke, what we found out is there had been a lot of money given to levee boards down there in order to fix and maintain the levees, but that was never done.
Well, there's a whole pump system that, because it's 6 to 8 feet underwater or under sea level, there's this elaborate pump system where these giant industrial pumps that were supposed to be on diesel engines that wouldn't need electricity were supposed to kick on and then pump water out of the bowl. And there were hundreds of millions of dollars over the years set aside for these levees. So they build up the levees. It's like a little crust around the city, like a pizza crust. And then you have these pump houses all around this pizza crust, and those things failed spectacularly.
Yeah. So then the levees break, the water starts coming in, and what people don't report is the levees had already broken in the Ninth Ward. At the time it's being announced that the levees broke, there was already 8 to 10 feet of water in the lower Ninth Ward. And remember, again, this is the first place in America where African Americans could buy real estate, and there was a levee wall there, but that was the first thing to go, that particular levee wall.
My house in the city had 5 feet of water.
Yeah, then in Gentilly, then we started seeing other levees break within the city, and that's when we started seeing lots of suffering, because then it's now after the storm, it's 98 degrees, there's lots of bugs, there's lots of snakes, there's lots of other things. The water is flooding into the city, and usually that's when you call in the National Guard. And I think the National Guard there is the 245th.
They're busy in Chicago right now.
Well, and the reason I knew that is because the National Guard was over in Iraq and Afghanistan from Louisiana, because Donald Rumsfeld had an army that he had created that was too small to fight in both places. So this is when they started calling in the National Guard. We know the National Guard's not there because on our radio show, we did some cause radio. We found out who the people were in the National Guard, and we all sent them a care box for the previous holiday. So we know that the 245th is over there. When I was in the city and the National Guard finally showed up, and I've talked about this before, guess whose National Guard it was? It wasn't anyone from the States, because lots of National Guard were over fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I remember trying to interview these guys, and I couldn't because my Spanish wasn't very good. It was the Mexican National Guard that actually showed up.
A general on horseback,
in the city. He wasn't part of the National Guard, but that was General Honore, who's from Louisiana. He finally came in and took over, told the local police there to put your guns down. Stop pointing your guns at people. Just because these are black people, you don't need to point your guns at them. We need to save these people, not point our guns at them. And we need to understand, if you see them going into a store and they're taking things from the store, they're doing that because they don't have food, they don't have water, and they have been forgotten in the city. So now fast forward in this docuseries.
Did Spike Lee have a clear agenda, you think, going into it?
Well, you watch it and you tell me. I will say this, though. They showed George Bush, who had been in California. He was doing a fundraiser over there in a political speech. He comes back. It's a couple days later after Katrina and the city is flooded. And he flies over in Air Force One, and then he doesn't land Air Force One, and he goes up to Washington. While he's in Washington, he begins to watch TV, and he can see all these people standing in front of cameras saying, "Where is the United States government?" So Spike Lee will show this picture of George Bush over and over and over and over again, peeking out that airplane window, which is pretty iconic. What he doesn't show you, though, as soon as George Bush figures out that he has really blown it politically, and also when it comes to humanity, Spike Lee doesn't show you that George Bush, while he was president, went to New Orleans 17 different times after he had blown the initial
flyover.
Yeah. He went back, and to this day, He still goes there. He goes to the Lower Ninth. He goes to Holly Grove. He eats red beans and rice. He heads over from Crawford, Texas. And he is a big advocate for the people of New Orleans. And Spike Lee doesn't show you that. He just shows you that, hey, this is some disconnected president. He's not African American. And this political speech to him was more important than landing that plane. Now fast forward to what we just saw in Texas with all those little girls dying. And who was one of the first ones to show up? It's the Cajun Navy, right? And the reason we have the Cajun Navy in the first place is because FEMA initially doesn't show up in Louisiana 20 years ago. And it's why every time you see a flood now or you see a storm, here come all these crazy guys from Louisiana and Texas and Alabama and Mississippi with their own boats. And they've created their own organization, and they go house to house. And it's these guys from the Cajun Navy. So at least Hurricane Katrina gave us that. And when I look at what just happened in Texas and all the people that showed up and all the resources and all the care and concern, we didn't necessarily see that in Louisiana, especially after the traumatic event was over. We saw a lot of journalists disappear out of there.
Well, not only that, I mean, I have the vivid memories of what happened in the dome down there was just insane.
Well, and then the docuseries talks about that. Like the federal government understood that there were people in the dome. What they didn't understand is there's 20 to 25,000 more people just a mile away at the convention center. And they have George Bush on tape when they're asking him, or they have Chertoff on tape when they're asking him, what about the 20,000 to 25,000 people at the convention center? And they're like, I never heard about 20 or 25,000 people at the convention center. So these people surely were forgotten. And now we're in a situation, and this is where FEMA got better, and they doubled down, and they said, you know what? If we take your standing army, which is what the federal government did, and Spike Lee doesn't make this point, if we take the 245th and we send them to Iraq and Afghanistan, where they haven't really been trained to fight a war in the desert, they have been trained for something like Hurricane Katrina. That's what the National Guard is supposed to do. And they're supposed to be local people that have some skin in the game as well. Chances are, if something were to happen in New Orleans today and the National Guard showed up, it's probably someone from the same parish that you're from. And instead, we have the Mexican National Guard there. So, and now my concern is, now we're going to peel back the layers of FEMA and say, we're going to abolish FEMA altogether. When we didn't have FEMA before, it is very, very difficult for states to respond to something so horrific as a hurricane, because like with Katrina, you don't know where it's going to land. You don't know what resources are going to get wiped out. And it's why you looked in the city and you saw fire trucks and police cars eventually from all over the country, because all that apparatus was gone.
What was the fumble in the third episode?
Well, it's kind of interesting because they mentioned Ray Nagin.
Okay.
Ray Nagin was the mayor of New Orleans. He appears to be a hero in this story. What Spike Lee never tells you is that Ray Nagin stole a bunch of money and a bunch of contracts. He steered those contracts toward his family so that he could benefit. And he was sentenced to 20 years.
He went to jail.
20 years, which he did 15 of. COVID, he ended up getting out early, so he did 15 years. Spike Lee never mentions that. He never mentions Oliver Pierce, who was on the school board there and who also took money. And now guess where he is now that he's done his time? He is back on the school board there. You have a mayor there that was just accused of taking a bunch of money and siphoning that off to her boyfriend, who was a police officer and on her detail. And it looks like that she funneled $70,000 his way so that they could stay in nice hotels and do fun things, I guess. So a lot of times this whole thing was blamed on George Bush. But what about the current mayor? What about someone that was on the school board? And how about someone who was the mayor of that city, and they all siphon road home money so people couldn't get home? And then as far as rebuilding homes there, if your home was worth more, they paid you more. So people that were in the Sliver on the River, or if you were in the Lower Guard District and you had a nice house, you got more money because they paid you per square foot rather than what they would give you in the Lower Ninth Ward. In the Lower Ninth Ward, people couldn't rebuild homes for the money that was given them because their houses weren't worth much in the first place. But they still had to rebuild them. So how do you rebuild a house that's maybe worth $35,000 and it's going to cost you $150,000 to build? Well, you call in Brad Pitt. And then Brad Pitt comes in, and Brad Pitt says, I'll tell you what Brad Pitt said on the other side of this.
Ron and Don, from radio to real estate. When you're ready to grab a cup of coffee and sit down with the guys, go to ronanddonsitdown.com.
Hey, you guys, welcome back to the Ron and Don Show. We're just kind of making this Katrina 20-year anniversary, and some of these other topics we'll get to on our next show. I was talking a little bit about Brad Pitt. Do you know about his love for architecture?
Yeah.
Do you know why he got involved in the Lower Ninth Ward? Because he said, you know what? If the federal government is not going to rebuild it, I'm going to find a way to raise money, because he was living in New Orleans at the time, and he said, I'll help rebuild the Lower Ninth Ward.
Yeah, Brad Pitt, before Katrina, Louisiana had a really great film industry. And so films like Ray were filmed down there. There's been a lot. I'm blanking on it right now. All the vampire movies with Tom Cruise.
You go out to eat, and all of a sudden Sean Penn would be sitting next to you.
So
They were filming 17 different major films
lots of films
at the time that Katrina hit. They call it the Southern Hollywood.
And so Brad Pitt, for a long time, has just been a huge architecture nerd. I remember when he was with Angelina Jolie, she, as a birthday present or anniversary present, got shut down falling water from Frank Lloyd Wright, and they got a private tour, and he was like over the moon, which is a pretty cool thing to do from your girlfriend or spouse to get that done for you. So he's just been a fan of architecture, and he said, you know what I'm going to do is have like a contest to do some like sustainable, really well-built houses. I'll use my celebrity for good and get a lot of money in here, and we'll go into a place like the Lower Ninth Ward. And I remember one of the ones that I thought was a brilliant idea is they were going to build these pilings like you'd see at a marina, where the house would float if it flooded. So if the neighborhood flooded, your house would just float up to the level of the water. And they had figured out a way to put the utilities and everything inside these concrete pilings. And then as the water receded, your house would go back down to the ground. So there were some really innovative things that were in there. And one of the problems that he did is he was trying to move quickly to help these folks. And then because it was a grant and because you wanted to get tax deduction for donations and all of the red tape with that, if they were like, ICE would come in and go, oh, these roofers aren't American citizens. And so it just slowed everything down to a halt where he couldn't get anything done on time or on budget.
Yeah, and I want people to know this, because I know there's some people that want to kick every Mexican out of this country. When they were having a problem rebuilding the Gulf South, it's because they were trying to do it with local labor. And the local labor wasn't skilled enough. Also, the local labor wasn't there. We have a friend down there that had a restaurant that employed 100 different people in the hospitality industry. They couldn't get them back because they didn't have a place for them to stay, right? So he ultimately ended up losing his restaurant because of that. And again, we talk about the black middle class and the 100,000, 120,000 that New Orleans has lost since kind of trying to rebuild the city. What Brad Pitt ultimately had to do, and I remember I remember talking about this on one of our newscasts when we were down there. He got in some trouble because a lot of his crews were Mexican, and they were also white, and they were from Texas, because he was having a hard time finding labor in the city itself, because again, that labor wasn't there to hire. So he brought over folks that were Mexican, people that were white, surely people that are black, to help rebuild the Lower Ninth Ward. Which they did, but he took a lot of hell for that. Also, some of the building materials that he used in those homes, some of the building materials failed. And as a result of that, what Spike Lee does kind of at this end of this docuseries is the people that own those homes, and in some cases, people that were given those homes, are blaming some of the maintenance that they have to do on houses. They're blaming that on Brad Pitt. and he ran an organization called Making It Right. And after this blew up in his face, he's like, I am done trying to make it right in Louisiana. I first tried to build these homes with local labor. There wasn't any. Then I brought in other labor from out of state. I got in trouble for that. And now some of these homes have issues because some of the building materials are failing. Or in one case, a woman just needed a new hot water tank. Hey, every 8 to 10 years, you're going to need a new hot water tank. So some of it is just blaming. And I wish they would have caught him on camera so he could kind of explain the reason why he left and disconnected. And what it makes it look like is that all these folks in the lower Ninth Ward and the Holly Grove and other places are standing there looking for a government handout, don't know how to take care of themselves, and that they're just victims. Here we are 20 years later, and we're just victims. I felt like Spike Lee did that a little bit at the end of this docuseries. And let's be honest about what George Bush did. He came back, right? Let's be honest about what Ray Nagin did and other people did. They stole road home money that were government grants from all of us, all as taxpayers around the United States.
In fairness to Spike Lee, and I haven't seen it, but I'll just say this. There was some stuff that happened along political lines that was distasteful. Mississippi had a Republican governor. Louisiana had a Democrat governor. There was FEMA trailers and different things that appeared faster in Mississippi than they did in Louisiana. Like there are instances that you could look at and go, look at that Republican state just got their FEMA trailers first.
That totally happened.
That's interesting.
That totally happened.
And they would go, look at that. We're getting less than the state next door, and it doesn't take a big leap to go, Republican, Democrat. So that did happen. I don't know if this was brought up, but like there was enough going on with police corruption, government corruption, eyes off the ball, all the stuff. It was a disaster unlike anything we've seen, and it was hard. It was difficult. It was a difficult job in the best of times. Once you throw in corruption and politics over the top of it, it became an impossible job. But I hope that, in my sincere hope into the universe, is that the people were able to find a landing spot. It's really heartbreaking to think of multi-generational families that maybe moved to Houston and weren't able to land on their feet. There was a lot of people that stole. There was a lot of people that did bad things, but there's more people that acted honorably and more people that, tried to use the money that they got from the government to land on their feet and to start a new life. And so I hope with all sincerity that people were able, I felt lucky and grateful to land on my feet. I hope they landed on their feet in some way.
Yeah, and a lot of them did go to Atlanta, Houston. Finally, they talk about the dismantling of the school system there, firing all the teachers, bringing in charter schools. And I was reading articles about the 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and some of those newspapers were saying, wow, what a success, and the rest of the world should look at this. Spike Lee doesn't like it at all because a lot of those teachers were African American. A lot of those teachers didn't make it back. A lot of those teachers were part of the middle class there of African Americans. And who came down? We saw this. It was lots of white people and lots of young white kids with college degrees, and they went in those schools and started teaching. And Spike Lee's docuseries will say, hey, it was all these young white kids that came down here that took over our neighborhoods. They took our jobs, they took our homes, and now there's no place for us to return to.
I'll have to watch. I'll watch it. I'll try to keep an open mind. I think I like that Spike Lee has an agenda. I don't have to agree with everything he says, but I would rather have a filmmaker have an agenda and try and defend it than I would to not. Like,
Yeah.
I enjoy that.
And it's very hard to tell the whole story. And in the first episode and the second episode, you see families actually riding the storm out. It's footage that I've never seen in the lower Ninth Ward, and it is incredibly scary. And I would just end with this. I hope people understand when you live down in that area, and we talked about not having resources, you're told 3 or 4 times a year that a big storm is coming, and you better make plans and get out of town and leave your dog behind. And some people just can't afford to do that 3 or 4 times a year. A lot of those hotels, if you pull up with a horse, or you pull up with a dog or a cat, they don't want them, right? And it's why there were so many animals that were left in the city. Many of them died. And then many of them were sent to other states, including Washington State here, and adopted, and we helped in that fashion. So anyway, take a look at it. New Orleans is nicknamed the city that cared for God. And when you see some of the footage, it's pretty horrendous. How do you lose 25,000 Americans and another 30,000 at the Kingdom, and then the federal,
Superdome.
and then the Superdome, and then the federal government comes out on camera and blames those people for not evacuating in time? It's really absolutely disgusting. So give it a look. See Katrina after 20 years, and I guess the good news is Ray Nagin's out. Yeah. And he can run for office again.
We met Ray a couple times. I enjoyed meeting him.
Eddie Compass, the police chief, is on there too, and we interviewed him.
Yeah, he was fun to be around, but obviously he had some hands in the cookie jar.
Hey, you guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the Ron and Don Show. If you need us for real estate, just reach out.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of buying lately. This is a great time to buy right now. So if you want to jump in that game, let's do a sit-down, ronandonsitdown.com. It's about a 30, 40-minute Zoom call, and we'll make sure we are all in alignment, and then we'll hit the go button.
Yeah, all right. ronandonsitdown.com. Hey, thanks for checking out the show today. Thanks for Grace for helping put our studio together. Matt Weston is here. My son's our station voice. Charlie the dog is, well, he's Charlie the dog. He's Ron and I'm Don. We're executive producers of the Ron and Don Show. And again, don't forget, if you need us for any reason at all, go to ronandonsitdown.com. In fact, right after the show today, we'll be doing a sit down. Yep, today. All right. Until next time, keep your head up and your shoulders back. And you've been listening to the Ron and Don Show. Ole! On the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Well, that's it. Show's over. We'll see you next time on the Ron and Don Radio Network.